A spilled glass of wine usually means a lost tip or, at worst, a stained shirt. But for Era Vance, a shy, struggling waitress at New York's most exclusive restaurant, a simple service mistake revealed a terrifying secret. When billionaire CEO Julian Thorne walked into her section, everyone saw a titan of industry. Era, however, smelled something else entirely, a faint metallic tang radiating from his skin that screamed of death. She risked her job to warn him, but she was thrown out on the street. She didn't know that by the time the sun set, Julian would be fighting for his life, and she would be the only person on Earth holding the antidote to a murder plot worth billions. This is the story of how the Invisible Girl saved the most powerful man in the city. The Obsidian Room was the kind of restaurant where the air conditioning hummed at a frequency designed to soothe nervous billionaires, and the lighting was dim enough to hide the price of the wine, but bright enough to catch the sparkle of diamonds. For Ara Vance, it was a minefield. At 24, Ara was invisible. She had mastered the art of blending into the beige velvet walls. She was the help, a pair of floating hands that delivered Wagyu beef and refilled sparkling water without making eye contact. It was a survival mechanism. After her mother's medical bills had decimated her savings and forced her to drop out of nursing school, just 2 semesters shy of graduation, this job was the only thing keeping her from eviction from her cramped apartment in Queens. Table 4, Ara. VIPs, don't mess this up. The floor manager, a man named Gustav, with a soul as starched as his collar, hissed into her ear. It's Julian Thorne. Ara's stomach tightened. Julian Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Halloway Logistics, the man whose face was currently plastered on the cover of Forbes as the king of the supply chain. She nodded, smoothing her black apron, and picked up the heavy tray of appetizers. As she approached table 4, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't just the money, it was the tension. Julian Thorne sat at the head of the booth. He was younger than he looked in the magazines, maybe early 40s, but his skin had a pallor that the ambient amber lighting couldn't quite mask. He was handsome in a sharp, intimidating way, wearing a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than Ara's entire life earnings. Sitting to his right was a woman of striking predatory beauty, his wife Isabella. To his left sat a man with nervous energy, constantly checking his phone, Marcus, his CFO. I'm telling you, Julian, the merger needs to happen by Friday, Marcus was saying, his voice a low thrum of urgency. The board is getting restless. I said I'd handle it, Marcus, Julian replied. His voice was deep, commanding, but Ara noticed a slight rasp, a weakness at the tail end of the sentence that didn't fit his powerful persona. Ara stepped into the circle of light. Good evening, the truffle arancini, compliments of the chef. She placed the plate down with practiced precision. As she leaned in to refill Julian's water glass, it hit her. It wasn't the smell of the truffle oil, which was pungent and earthy. It wasn't the expensive musk of Julian's cologne, something woodsy and clean like cedar. It was underneath all that, a sharp, coppery tang. It smelled like a handful of old pennies. It smelled like a wet iron fence. It smelled like blood. Aara froze for a fraction of a second. Her nursing training, buried under 2 years of waiting tables, kicked into overdrive. She instinctively looked at Julian's hands resting on the white tablecloth. His fingernails, usually the first sign, weren't pink. The nail beds were pale, bordering on blue, with tiny splinter-like hemorrhages visible if you looked close enough. He's bleeding, she thought. Somewhere inside, he's bleeding. Is there a problem? Isabella's voice snapped like a whip. Ara jolted back, clutching the water pitcher. No, ma'am, apologies. I wanted to ensure everything was perfect. Isabella looked her up and down with a disdain that could peel paint. Then stop hovering and pour. Ayara finished pouring, her heart hammering against her ribs. As she moved around Julian, the scent intensified. It was coming from his pores. It was a metabolic smell, the scent of a body breaking down red blood cells faster than it could replace them. This wasn't just stress. This wasn't a flu. Julian, you haven't touched your wine, Isabella said, her voice shifting from jagged to sickly sweet. She pushed a glass of dark, rich Cabernet toward him. It's the 2005 vintage you love. It'll help you relax. Julian rubbed his temples, his hand trembling slightly. I'm not feeling up to it, Isa. My stomach has been off all week. Just a sip, Marcus urged from the other side, to celebrate the deal. Ayara watched Julian reach for the glass. The metallic smell seemed to spike, assaulting her senses. In her mind, she saw the textbooks she used to study until 3 a.m. Breath smells metallic, pale nail beds, tremors, confusion. This wasn't a stomach ulcer. Wait, Era said. The word came out before she could stop it. It wasn't a polite waitress whisper. It was a command. The table went silent. 3 pairs of eyes locked onto her. Excuse me? Julian asked, his brow furrowing. He looked more exhausted than angry. Ara's hands shook. She knew she was crossing a line that would get her fired, but she also knew what she was smelling. Sir, I noticed you don't look well. Have you seen a doctor recently? Gustav, the manager, was already speed-walking toward the table from the shadows, his face purple with rage. Isabella laughed, a cold tinkling sound. Excuse me, are you a waitress or a physician? I was a nursing student, Era stammered, addressing Julian directly, ignoring the wife. Sir, that metallic scent. Your skin smells like iron, and your fingernails. Please don't drink the wine. It could irritate enough. Isabella slammed her hand on the table, causing the silverware to jump. Gustav, get this incompetent girl away from us immediately. She is harassing my husband. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thorne, Gustav said, grabbing Ara's arm with a grip that bruised. Mrs. Thorne, she is new. She is leaving right now. I'm just trying to help, Ara pleaded, looking at Julian. He was staring at her, his eyes foggy, confusion swimming in the gray irises. Sir, please go to the hospital. Ask for a heavy metal panel, please. Get her out, Marcus barked. Gustav dragged her away from the table. As she was pulled backward, she saw Julian hesitate. He looked at the wine glass, then at his wife, who was smiling encouragingly. He lifted the glass to his lips. Ara felt a scream rise in her throat, but Gustav shoved her through the kitchen doors. The noise of the dining room cut off instantly. You are done, Gustav spat, practically throwing her toward the lockers. Pack your things. Don't even think about asking for your tips for tonight. If I see you on this property in 10 minutes, I'm calling the police. Ara sat on the fire escape of her apartment building, the cold night air biting through her thin sweater. It was too late. She had been fired 4 hours ago. Her phone sat on the rusted metal grate beside her, the screen glowing with a Google image search result for Julian Thorne. The photos from 6 months ago showed a vibrant man, shoulders back, eyes sharp, skin tanned and healthy. He looked like a titan. The man she had seen tonight was a ghost of this person. He had lost at least 20 pounds. His skin was gray. She scrolled through the news articles. Thorne Dynamics stock dips amid CEO health rumors. Isabella Thorne to host charity gala for liver disease awareness. Era paused. Liver disease. It's the perfect cover, she whispered to the empty alleyway. If someone has liver failure, they get jaundice, they get confused, they get tremors. It mimics poisoning. She pulled up her old digital textbooks on her phone, searching for specific symptoms. Chronic arsenic poisoning, metallic taste or smell, Mace's lines, white lines on fingernails, garlic odor on breath, sometimes metallic, confusion, brain fog, gastrointestinal distress. It fit. It fit perfectly. But why? She looked up the wife, Isabella Thorne, a former model married to Julian for only 2 years, and Marcus Sterling, the CFO. Era dug deeper. She found a page on a business gossip blog. Rumors swirl of tension between CEO Julian Thorne and CFO Marcus Sterling regarding the acquisition of shipment routes in the Pacific. He's being murdered, Era realized, a chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the win. And they're doing it slowly so it looks like a natural illness. She couldn't just sit there. She had no job, no money, and no credibility. But she had a conscience. She needed to warn him again. But how? He lived in a penthouse on Fifth Avenue that was more fortress than home. His office was a glass tower downtown with security tighter than the Pentagon. Then she saw the latest news alert pop up on her screen. Breaking, Julian Thorne to make rare public appearance tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. for the groundbreaking ceremony of the new Thorne Children's Hospital in Brooklyn. It was a PR move, a sick CEO trying to show strength. He'll be outside, Ara thought. There will be crowds, press. She went back inside her apartment and opened her nearly empty fridge. She grabbed a bottle of water and a protein bar, her dinner. As she chewed, she formulated a plan. She couldn't just run up to him. Security would tackle her before she got within 10 feet. She needed to be smart. She needed to get a message to him that he couldn't ignore. She spent the rest of the night writing, not a letter but a medical note. She wrote it on a piece of paper ripped from an old notebook, using the precise medical terminology she had learned in school. Patient, male approx 45, symptoms observed, pallor, diaphoresis, resting tremor, distinct metallic odor, consistent with heavy metal toxicity or severe internal hemorrhage. Recommendation: immediate toxicology screen for arsenic and thallium. Do not trust food drink provided by Immediate Circle. She folded the note until it was the size of a postage stamp. The next morning, the sun rose over Brooklyn, casting long shadows over the construction site where the new hospital was being built. A podium had been set up, draped in blue velvet. A crowd of reporters, curious onlookers, and hospital staff were already gathering behind the velvet ropes. Aura wore her most professional clothes. A charcoal blazer she usually saved for interviews and black slacks. She pulled her hair back into a tight bun. She didn't look like a waitress today. She looked like an assistant, or maybe a junior reporter. She maneuvered her way to the front of the barricade, squeezing between a cameraman from Channel 4 and a large woman holding a sign that said, "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." At 9:55 a.m., the black SUVs arrived. The crowd cheered. The doors opened and security guards with earpieces swarmed out, creating a perimeter. Then Julian emerged. If he looked bad last night, he looked terrible today. He was wearing sunglasses, likely to hide the dark circles under his eyes. He leaned heavily on a cane, something he hadn't used in the photos from a month ago. Isabella was right beside him, her hand firmly on his elbow, ostensibly guiding him, but to Era it looked like she was propping him up. Marcus Sterling followed close behind, checking his watch. They began the slow walk toward the podium. They had to pass right by where Era was standing, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was her one chance. As Julian drew closer, Era inhaled. Even over the smell of fresh dirt and diesel fumes from the construction equipment, she caught a whiff of it again, the metallic scent. It was stronger today. He was actively crashing. He paused just 5 feet away from her to wave at the crowd. He swayed, his knees buckling slightly. Isabella gripped his arm tighter, her smile never wavering for the cameras. "Just a little further, darling," Era heard Isabella whisper. It sounded more like a threat than comfort. Ara knew she couldn't just yell. She needed to get the note into his hand. She waited for the moment his gaze swept over the crowd. For a split second, behind the dark lenses, he seemed to look in her direction. "Mr. Thorne!" Ara shouted, not with the hysteria of a fan, but with the authority of a triage nurse. "Mr. Thorne, look at your hands." It was a weird thing to shout. It worked. Julian stopped. He looked down at his free hand, the one gripping the cane. In that second of confusion, Ara lunged over the barricade. "Security!" Marcus screamed. 2 massive guards turned toward her. Ara didn't try to fight them. She didn't try to run. Instead, she crumpled the note into a ball and threw it. It was a desperate Hail Mary toss. The ball of paper arced through the air. It hit Julian's chest and bounced off, landing on the red carpet at his feet. A security guard tackled Ara, slamming her into the gravel. "Stay down. Don't move." "Read the note!" Ara screamed, her face pressed into the dirt. "They're killing you. Read the note." Isabella kicked the piece of paper away with her designer heel, looking at the security team with fury. "Get this lunatic out of here. Why is security so lax?" Marcus stepped forward to kick the paper further away, but Julian, dazed and swaying, did something unexpected. He raised his cane to stop Marcus. "Wait," Julian rasped. He looked at the girl pinned to the ground. He recognized her, the waitress from last night, the one who had risked her job. Now she was risking her freedom. Julian bent down, his movement agonizingly slow. His hand shook violently as he reached for the crumpled ball of paper. "Julian, don't touch that. It could be anthrax," Isabella shrieked, her composure cracking. Julian ignored her. He picked up the paper. "Get her out of here," the head of security commanded, hauling Ara up. She was handcuffed in seconds. "Check your blood," Ara yelled as they dragged her toward a police cruiser. "Don't let them treat you for a heart attack. Check for poison." Julian unfolded the paper. He stared at the handwritten medical observations. He looked at his own hand, then at his wife, then at Marcus. The color drained from his already pale face. He didn't look up as the police car drove Ara away. He simply shoved the note into his pocket, gripped his cane, and turned to his wife. "I need a water," he said, his voice deadly quiet. and not from you. The flash bulbs were blinding. To Julian Thorne, they didn't look like cameras anymore. They looked like exploding stars. He stood behind the podium, the wood cool under his sweating palms. He had shoved Ara's crumpled note into his jacket pocket, keeping his hand over it as if it were a burning coal. The crowd was waiting. The press was waiting. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian began, his voice booming through the speakers. But inside his head it sounded distant, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "We are here to build a future." A wave of nausea rolled over him, violent and sudden. The metallic taste in his mouth exploded, coating his tongue with the flavor of rusty pipes. He looked to his right. Isabella was clapping softly, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. She wasn't looking at his face. She was watching his hands, watching for the tremor. Beside her, Marcus checked his watch again. Why is he checking the time? Julian thought sluggishly. Is he waiting for a meeting or is he waiting for me to drop? The realization hit Julian harder than the nausea. The wine last night, the coffee this morning, the vitamin shot Isabella insisted he take for his energy. The girl was right. The waitress, she had smelled it on him. She had seen the blue nail beds. Julian tried to take a deep breath, but his lungs felt heavy, as if they were filling with fluid. He looked down at his speech, but the letters were swimming. We believe in, he faltered. The crowd murmured. A hush fell over the construction site. Julian! Isabella stepped forward, her voice projected for the microphones to pick up, laced with practiced concern. Darling, are you all right? Someone bring a chair. He's been working so hard. She reached for him. Don't, Julian rasped, pulling his arm away. The movement threw him off balance. The world tilted on its axis. The blue sky spun and swapped places with the gravel ground. Poison, Julian whispered. But the microphone didn't pick it up. It was just a breath of air. His knees gave way. He didn't crumple gracefully like they did in the movies. He fell like a tree, stiff, heavy, and hard. He slammed into the wooden podium before crashing onto the red carpet. Julian! Isabella screamed. It was a perfect, blood-curdling scream, Oscar-worthy. Chaos erupted. The security line broke as reporters surged forward to get the shot of the fallen billionaire. The live feed cut to black, but not before millions of viewers saw the king of supply chain seizing on the ground. Isabella was on top of him instantly. Call 911. My husband is having a heart attack. He has a heart condition. Julian was conscious, but he was locked inside his own body. He could hear her. Heart attack? He has a heart condition. He tried to shake his head. He tried to speak. No heart condition. He wanted to scream, check the blood. But his jaw was clamped shut, his muscles seizing in a rhythmic, agonizing spasm. Back up! Give him air! A large shadow fell over him. It was Silas, his head of personal security. Silas was a former Navy SEAL, a man who spoke 10 words a year. He shoved Marcus aside with one hand and knelt by Julian. Boss, Silas grunted, checking for a pulse. Julian's eyes found Silas's face. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move his arms, but he could feel the lump of paper in his jacket pocket. The note. He focused every ounce of his remaining will on his right hand. He twitched his fingers against the pocket flap. The pocket. Check the pocket. His pulse is erratic, Isabella cried, grabbing Julian's shirt, shaking him. He's dying, Marcus. Do something. The ambulance is 2 minutes out, Marcus yelled, his face pale but his eyes gleaming with something that wasn't fear. It was anticipation. Silas saw the twitch. He saw Julian's desperate eyes darting from his pocket to Silas's face. Silas reached into the jacket. What are you doing? Don't rob him, Isabella snapped, trying to slap Silas's hand away. Silas ignored her. His massive hand retrieved the crumpled ball of paper. He frowned, shielding it from the cameras with his broad body. He smoothed it out against his thigh. Distinct metallic odor consistent with heavy metal toxicity. Recommendation, immediate toxicology screen for arsenic and thallium. Silas looked at the paper. He looked at the grieving wife who was already listing Julian's heart medications to an arriving paramedic. He looked at the girl who had been dragged away in handcuffs 10 minutes ago. The paramedics swarmed in. Sir, we need to intubate. Clear the way. They loaded Julian onto the stretcher. I'm coming with him, Isabella declared, standing up and wiping a tear from a dry cheek. I'll drive the follow car, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. I need to call the board. Let them know the CEO is incapacitated. Silas stood up. He pocketed the note. He didn't get in the ambulance. He didn't get in the follow car. He tapped his earpiece. Base, this is Silas. I need a trace on the NYPD cruiser that just left the site. Find out where they are taking the girl now. Sir, the voice in his ear crackled. The priority is Mr. Thorne. Mr. Thorne is surrounded by sharks, Silas growled, watching the ambulance speed away with Isabella inside. I'm going to find the only person who tried to save him. The interrogation room at the 78th precinct smelled of stale coffee and damp concrete. It was a smell Era knew well from her childhood in a rough neighborhood, a smell that usually meant bad news. She was handcuffed to a metal table. Her blazer was torn at the shoulder from where the security guard had tackled her. Her hair was a mess. Across from her sat Detective Miller. He looked tired. He had a stain on his tie and a folder thick with her record, which consisted entirely of a parking ticket from 3 years ago. So, Miller said, leaning back in his chair, let's go over this again, Miss Vance. You were fired from the Obsidian Room last night for harassing Mr. Thorne, and this morning you ambushed him at a public event. That's stalking, plain and simple. It's not stalking, Era said, her voice shaking but her eyes defiant. I was trying to warn him. Warn him about what? Aliens? Government mind control? Miller smirked. Arsenic, Era said flatly, and thallium. They are tasteless, odorless, heavy metals, but in high doses, the body tries to excrete them through the pores in the lungs. It creates a specific metallic scent, like wet copper. Miller sighed and rubbed his face. Look, I get it. You're a nursing school dropout. You think you know things, but attacking a billionaire? I didn't attack him. Era pulled against the cuffs. Did you see the news? Did he collapse? Tell me, did he fall? Miller hesitated. He glanced at the muted TV in the corner of the room. The breaking news banner was red and flashing. Billionaire CEO collapses on stage. Condition critical. Ara followed his gaze. He collapsed, she breathed. Oh God, it's already happening. The organ failure is starting. She leaned forward, the chains rattling. Detective, listen to me. If they treat him for a heart attack, they will give him blood thinners. If he has heavy metal poisoning, his blood vessels are already fragile. Thinners will cause massive internal hemorrhaging. They will kill him. Miller looked at her. He looked at the TV. Who is treating him? Ara demanded. He was taken to St. Jude's. It's the best trauma center in the city, Miller said, his tone losing some of its mockery. Who is with him? His wife? His business partner? Ara laughed, a dry, humorless sound. His wife? The woman who ordered his wine last night? The woman who wouldn't let him leave the table? Detective, if she is in that room, Julian Thorne is a dead man. The door to the interrogation room banged open. Miller jumped. Hey, I'm in the middle of a... He stopped. Standing in the doorway was a mountain of a man in a black tactical suit. Behind him was the precinct captain looking terrified. Silas, Miller asked. Everyone in law enforcement knew Silas. He was private sector now, but he was a legend in the tactical community. Silas ignored Miller. He walked straight to the table and looked down at Ara. Ara shrank back. This was the man who had been guarding Julian. Did you write this? Silas held up the crumpled piece of notebook paper. Ara nodded slowly. Yes. You said check the blood. Silas's voice was like gravel grinding together. Yes, a heavy metal panel. It takes 2 hours, but they can do a rush on it. Silas turned to Miller. Uncuff her. Excuse me, Miller stood up. She's a suspect in an assault. She is a witness in an attempted murder investigation, Silas said calmly, and she is the only medical consultant I trust right now, because she's the only one who doesn't stand to inherit $5 billion if Julian dies. Miller gaped. Attempted murder? You think the wife? I don't think. I know. Silas unlocked the cuffs himself with a key he produced from his pocket. He grabbed Ara's arm, not roughly but with urgency. Come with me. Where are we going? Ara asked, rubbing her wrists as she trotted to keep up with his long strides down the hallway. St. Jude's Hospital, Silas said, pushing through the precinct doors into the bright sunlight where a black armored SUV was waiting, engine running. The doctors are preparing to take Julian into surgery for a triple bypass. His wife signed the consent forms. Ara gasped as she climbed into the car. A bypass? They're going to cut him open. With his platelet count that low, he'll bleed out on the table in 5 minutes. Exactly, Silas said, slamming the door and jumping into the driver's seat. He peeled out of the parking lot, sirens wailing, illegal for a private car, but nobody was going to stop him. We have 12 minutes to get across the city, Silas said, looking at Ara in the rearview mirror. When we get there, you aren't a waitress. You aren't a dropout. You're my specialist. You understand? Ara looked at her torn blazer and dirty hands. Then she thought of Julian Thorne's eyes, confused, terrified, and dying in front of a crowd. She straightened her spine. She tied her hair back tighter. I understand, she said. Drive. The VIP waiting room at St. Jude's was more like a hotel lobby. Isabella Thorne was pacing, holding a handkerchief to her dry eyes. Marcus Sterling was on the phone, speaking in hushed, angry tones. Yes, the stock is plummeting. Buy the dip. We'll announce the death by this evening, and it will rebound by Monday. I know what I'm doing. Marcus hung up as a surgeon in blue scrubs entered the room. It was Dr. Carter, the chief of cardiology. Mrs. Thorne, Dr. Carter said gravely. Is he? Isabella made a show of trembling. He is stable for now, Dr. Carter said, but his heart is miling. We need to operate immediately to bypass the blockage. It's risky, but it's his only chance. Do it, Marcus said quickly. Do whatever you have to do. Please save him, Isabella whispered. We're moving him to the OR now, Dr. Carter said. I'll update you as soon as the first incision is made. Dr. Carter turned back toward the double doors that led to the surgical wing. Suddenly, the doors at the end of the hallway exploded open. Silas didn't walk in. He stormed in. And right beside him, looking fierce despite her ragged clothes, was Ara. Stop! Ara screamed, her voice echoing off the sterile walls. Don't cut him! Isabella's head snapped up. Her face went from grieving widow to mask of pure rage in a nanosecond. You, how did you get out of jail? Security! Arrest this trash, Marcus yelled, moving to block them. Silas didn't slow down. He stiff-armed Marcus, sending the CFO flying into a row of plastic chairs. Dr. Carter looked alarmed. What is the meaning of this? We have a patient in critical condition. Ara stepped in front of the surgeon. She was trembling, but she forced herself to look the doctor in the eye. Doctor, look at his chart, Ara said fast, desperate. Does he have Mace's lines on his fingernails? Is his white blood cell count inexplicably low? Is he presenting with peripheral neuropathy? Carter blinked, taken aback by the specific medical jargon coming from the girl in the dirty blazer. Well, yes, he has some neurological deficits, but we attributed that to the hypoxia from the heart failure. It's not heart failure, Ara yelled. It's thallium poisoning. If you cut him open, he won't clot. He will die on your table, and you will be liable for malpractice because you missed the signs. This is Isabella shrieked. She is a waitress. She served us dinner last night. She is a stalker. Dr. Carter, operate on my husband now or I will sue this hospital into the ground. Dr. Carter looked at Isabella, then at the threat. A lawsuit was powerful. I have consent from the next of kin, Dr. Carter said sternly. Move aside. I have the power of attorney, a deep voice boomed. Everyone froze. Silas held up a phone. On the screen was a digital document. Julian Thorne updated his security protocol 6 months ago, Silas said, his voice cold. In the event that his life is threatened by a member of his inner circle, decision-making power reverts to the head of security. That's me. Isabella turned pale. That's a lie. He would never. He did. Silas lied. The document was real, but it was for kidnapping scenarios, not medical ones. But Silas was banking on the fact that nobody would read the fine print in the next 30 seconds. I am ordering a toxicology screen, Silas said to Dr. Carter. And this woman, he pointed to Ara, is observing the treatment. This is preposterous, Marcus shouted, getting up from the floor. I'm calling the police. Call them, Silas challenged, and tell them why you're so afraid of a blood test. Dr. Carter looked at the tension in the room. He looked at the symptoms Ara had listed. He was a man of science, and doubt had crept in. A tox screen takes time, Dr. Carter said, but we can delay surgery for 20 minutes to run a rapid panel. If he crashes, we cut. 20 minutes, Ara said. That's all we need. She turned to look at Isabella. The wife was no longer crying. She was staring at Ara with the cold, dead eyes of a shark that had just lost its prey. You better be right, Silas whispered to Ara as the doctors rushed back into the OR. I am, Ara said, though her knees were shaking. I smelled it. The 20 minutes that followed were the longest of Ara Vance's life. The waiting room had transformed into a silent battlefield. On one side sat Isabella Thorne and Marcus Sterling. They were huddled together on a leather sofa, whispering furiously. Isabella was texting rapidly on her phone, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the screen like the tapping of frantic beetles. Every few seconds she would glare at Era, a look of pure, unadulterated venom. On the other side, standing guard by the double doors of the operating theater, was Silas. He looked like a statue carved from granite, his arms crossed, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses, though everyone knew exactly who he was watching. And then there was Ara. She sat alone on a plastic chair, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She felt small. She was just a waitress in a torn blazer, surrounded by people whose shoes cost more than her education. Doubt began to gnaw at her. What if I'm wrong? The thought was terrifying. If she was wrong, Julian would die on the table because she delayed his surgery. She would go to prison for manslaughter. Her life would be over. She closed her eyes and tried to summon the memory of the scent, that sharp, wet, rusty tang. No, she told herself. I know that smell. I smelled it on my grandmother before she passed from kidney failure. But this was sharper. This was chemical. You're going to jail, right? Ayara opened her eyes. Marcus Sterling was standing over her. He had regained his composure, smoothing his expensive tie. Excuse me, Ira said. This little stunt, Marcus sneered, keeping his voice low so Silas wouldn't hear. Interfering with medical care, assaulting a corporate officer. Even if by some miracle Julian survives, I will make sure you are buried under so many lawsuits you won't be able to afford air to breathe. Why are you so afraid of the test results, Mr. Sterling? Ara asked, her voice trembling, but her chin high. Marcus leaned in, his eyes cold and dead. Because Julian is weak. He's always been weak. He doesn't have the stomach for what needs to be done to keep this company on top. The world doesn't need a hero, Era. It needs logistics. It needs profit. And you're just a bug on the windshield. Back away. Silas's voice rumbled from across the room. He hadn't moved, but his hand was resting on his belt. Marcus scoffed and stepped back. Tick-tock, waitress. Your 15 minutes are almost up. At that moment, the double door swung open. It wasn't a nurse. It was Dr. Carter. And he wasn't walking. He was running. Behind him trailed two other specialists looking pale and frantic. Isabella shot up from the sofa. Well, is he prepped for the bypass? Dr. Carter ignored her. He looked straight at Ara. The expression on his face was a mixture of shock and awe. You, Dr. Carter breathed. Who are you? Is he okay? Ara stood up, her legs wobbly. Dr. Carter held up a printout, the paper shaking in his hand. Thallium levels are at 400 micrograms per liter. Arsenic is present but lower. It's lethal toxicity. If we had made a single incision, he would have hemorrhaged instantly. You were right. The room went dead silent. Isabella let out a strangled gasp. That's impossible. It must be a mistake. A lab error. We ran it twice, Dr. Carter snapped. His demeanor toward the wife completely changed. He turned to his team. Get him on Prussian blue immediately. Oral administration via NG tube. I want dialysis prep to filter the blood, and get the police on the line now. Police, Marcus squeaked. Now hold on, let's not be hasty. Julian could have ingested this anywhere. The food supply chain, thallium is a banned substance. Silas interrupted. He stepped forward, blocking the exit. You don't get that from bad sushi, Marcus. You get it from rat poison or from a chemical supplier. Isabella's face crumpled. The grieving widow mask dissolved, revealing the terrified, cornered animal underneath. She looked at the door. Silas was there. She looked at the window. It was sealed. I need to go to the bathroom, she stammered, clutching her Prada bag. Sit down, Silas commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. You can't keep me here. This is kidnapping, Isabella shrieked. No, a new voice said from the hallway entrance. Detective Miller stood bare, looking far more awake than he had in the interrogation room. Behind him were 4 uniformed officers. It's a crime scene containment, Miller said. He looked at Era, then at the doctor. He took a deep breath. Miss Vance, I think I owe you an apology and a coffee. Ara didn't want coffee. She wanted to cry. She slumped back into her chair, the adrenaline crashing out of her system. He's alive, she thought. They didn't cut him. Arrest them, Silas said, pointing a thick finger at Isabella and Marcus. On what grounds? Marcus shouted, his face turning purple. You have no proof we did this. You'll check your search history, Marcus, Era said quietly. Marcus froze. Thallium poisoning is tricky, Era continued, her nursing training taking over. The dosage has to be precise to mimic a slow illness. Mm. You'd need to research it. You'd need to know exactly how much to put in his wine or his coffee to keep him sick but not kill him too fast. You wanted him to die right after the merger, didn't you? Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Cuff them, Miller ordered. Don't touch me! Do you know who I am? Isabella screamed as a female officer grabbed her wrists. I am Isabella Thorne. I am the victim here. My husband is dying. Your husband is being treated, Dr. Carter said coldly, and thanks to this young woman, he's going to survive. As Isabella and Marcus were dragged out of the waiting room, Isabella kicking and screaming, Marcus weeping and threatening to sue the entire NYPD, the hospital corridor finally fell quiet. Dr. Carter walked over to Ara. He looked at her torn clothes, her messy hair, and then he extended his hand. I've been a cardiologist for 20 years, he said. I've never seen a diagnosis made by smell. You have a gift, Ms. Vance. Where do you practice? I, I was a waitress, Ara whispered. I dropped out of nursing school. Couldn't afford the tuition. Dr. Carter looked at her for a long moment. We'll see about that, he said. Come with me. I think the patient might want to see you when he wakes up. It took 3 days for the fog to lift from Julian Thorne's mind. For the first 48 hours, he was in a delirium. The chelation therapy, the process of scrubbing the heavy metals from his blood, was grueling. He hallucinated. He saw giant spiders made of copper wire. He saw Isabella feeding him spoonfuls of black tar. He saw a girl with sad eyes standing guard at the foot of his bed, holding a shield. When he finally woke up on the third morning, the room was quiet. The sun was streaming in through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He felt weak, weaker than he had ever felt in his life. His limbs felt like they were made of lead, but his head was clear. For the first time in months, the crushing headache was gone. The confusion was gone. He turned his head slowly. Silas was sitting in a chair by the door reading a paperback novel, and in the armchair next to the bed, asleep, was the girl. She was wearing fresh scrubs. Someone must have given them to her, and her hair was washed, falling loosely over her shoulders. She looked exhausted. Water, Julian croaked. His voice sounded like grinding stones. Silas was up instantly. He poured a glass of water and held the straw to Julian's lips. Easy, boss, Silas murmured. You've been through the ringer. Julian drank greedily. The girl, he whispered. Ara, Silas said. Her name is Ara Vance. She hasn't left the room in 3 days. Dr. Carter tried to kick her out, but I told him, if she leaves, I leave. And if I leave, nobody guards you. Julian looked at her. She stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered. Her eyes opened, warm brown eyes that held a depth of kindness he wasn't used to seeing. She sat up quickly, rubbing her face. Mr. Thorne, you're awake. Don't try to move too much. Your electrolytes are still stabilizing. You, Julian managed to say. The note. You threw the note. I did. Ara smiled tentatively. Sorry about hitting you in the chest. You saved my life, Julian said. The reality of it crashed down on him. The memory of the wine, Isabella's insistence, Marcus's urgency. They tried to kill me. Isabella. In custody, Silas said grimly, along with Marcus. The police found a supply of thallium sulfate in Marcus's pool house, and they found searches on Isabella's iPad for untraceable poisons in widow's inheritance tax. Julian closed his eyes. The betrayal was a physical pain, sharper than the needles in his arms. He had loved her, or he thought he had. He had trusted Marcus like a brother. The merger, Julian said suddenly, his eyes snapping open. What day is it? It's Tuesday, Silas said. The board vote on the Pacific merger is tomorrow morning at 9:02 a.m. if I'm not there, Julian said, his mind racing despite his weakness. The emergency bylaws state that the vote goes through automatically. Marcus set it up that way. Even from jail, his proxy vote counts unless I personally override it. Sir, you can't go to a meeting, Ara said firmly, stepping to the bedside. Your kidneys are recovering. Your heart is under strain. Need rest. Julian looked at her. Ara, if that merger happens, Marcus's shell companies take control of the supply routes. They will strip the company for parts. Thousands of people will lose their jobs. My life's work, destroyed. He tried to sit up but collapsed back against the pillows, gasping. See? Ara adjusted his blanket. You're not Superman. I don't need to be Superman. Julian gritted his teeth. I just need to appear to be. He looked at Silas. Does the public know I'm awake? No, Silas said. The official statement is that you are in a coma and prognosis is poor. The stock dropped 15%. Good. Julian's eyes narrowed. A cold, hard glint appeared in them. The look that had made him the king of the supply chain. Keep it that way. What are you planning? Era asked, a mix of worry and curiosity in her voice. I'm going to die, Julian said. Ara and Silas exchanged a look. Excuse me? Ara checked his heart monitor. Not literally, Julian corrected, but as far as the board of directors is concerned, as far as the media is concerned, Julian Thorne is on his deathbed. I want the sharks to circle. I want to see who else in that boardroom tries to take a bite out of my carcass. He turned to Ara. Can you get me out of here, medically speaking? Absolutely not, Ara said. You need an IV drip for the Prussian blue. You need constant monitoring. Can you do it? Julian interrupted. You have nursing training. Can you monitor me? If I hire a private ambulance, if I set up a medical suite in my office? Mr. Thorne, I'm a waitress, Era reminded him. You are the only person in this city who isn't trying to kill me or bill me, Julian said intensely. I will pay you whatever you want. Tuition, a house, a golden island. Just help me get to that meeting tomorrow. Ara looked at the desperate, powerful man. She thought about Gustav firing her. She thought about the arrogance of Marcus and Isabella. She thought about the people who would lose their jobs if the company collapsed. She looked at Silas. Can you get a wheelchair that doesn't look like a wheelchair? Silas grinned, a rare, terrifying expression. I can get a tactical extraction chair. We can drape it in a suit. Ara turned back to Julian. She took a deep breath. Okay, but on one condition. Anything, Julian said. You drink 3 liters of water between now and then. And if I say stop, we stop. No arguments. Deal, Julian said. He held out his hand. Ara took it. His grip was weak, but his skin was warm. The metallic smell was gone, replaced by the scent of antiseptic soap and hope. The Thorne-Halloway boardroom was a masterpiece of glass and steel, suspended 50 stories above Manhattan. Around the massive mahogany table sat 12 men and women. They were the board of directors. At the head of the table sat an empty leather chair. At the other end, presiding via video link from a holding cell, was Marcus Sterling. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, but his arrogance remained untouched. This is irregular, one of the board members, an elderly woman named Mrs. Higgins, said nervously. Mr. Sterling is under indictment for attempted murder. Alleged attempted murder? Marcus's voice crackled. Over the speakers, and until I am convicted, I retain my seat and my voting rights. The merger needs to proceed. It is what Julian would have wanted. God rest his soul. He's not dead yet, Mrs. Higgins pointed out. He's in a coma with complete organ failure, Marcus retorted. Let's be realistic. The company needs leadership. I am motioning to finalize the Pacific merger and appoint myself as interim CEO effective immediately. Seconded, said a man in a gray suit, one of Marcus's cronies. All in favor? Marcus asked. 6 hands went up. It was a split vote. We need a tiebreaker, Marcus said, and as acting chair in Julian's absence, my vote counts double. Actually, a voice came from the intercom system. That's not quite right. The board members looked around, confused. The voice sounded familiar, but it was impossible. The heavy double doors at the entrance of the boardroom hissed open. The room gasped as one. Julian Thorne did not walk in. He rolled in, sitting in a high-backed, sleek black chair pushed by a massive security guard. But he was upright. He was wearing a suit, impeccably tailored to hide the IV lines running under his shirt. His face was pale, yes, but his eyes were blazing blue fire. And standing right beside him, pushing an IV pole that had been cleverly disguised as a coat rack, was Ara Vance. She wore a sharp black pantsuit that Silas had procured for her. She looked like an executive assistant, but her eyes were scanning the room like a hawk. Julian! Mrs. Higgins stood up, her hand over her mouth. But the reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated, Julian said. His voice was amplified by a small microphone clipped to his lapel, hiding the rasp. He looked at the screen. Marcus's face on the monitor had gone sheet white. Marcus, Julian said coolly, you look good in orange. It suits your complexion. This is a trick, Marcus stammered. He's hallucinating. He's not fit to lead. Julian raised a hand. I am perfectly fit, and I am exercising my right as majority shareholder to veto the merger. He looked around the table, making an eye contact with every person who had raised their hand to vote with Marcus. They lowered their hands, shrinking into their seats. Furthermore, Julian continued, I am calling for an immediate vote to remove Marcus Sterling from the board, strip him of his stock options for breach of fiduciary duty, and terminate his employment. All in favor? Every hand in the room shot up. Even Marcus's cronies, sensing the change in the wind, voted against him. Motion carried, Julian said. Silas, cut the feed. The screen went black, cutting off Marcus's screaming protests. Julian let out a breath, his head drooping slightly. Aura was there instantly, placing a hand on his shoulder and checking his pulse at the neck discreetly. He needs to rest, Aura announced to the room. The meeting is adjourned. Nobody argued. They were too terrified. As Silas wheeled Julian back toward his private office, the applause started. It began with Mrs. Higgins and spread until the whole boardroom was clapping. Julian didn't care about the applause. He cared about the fact that he was alive. Back in the safety of his office, Aura hooked his IV back up to the fluids. Julian slumped in the chair, the energy draining out of him. We did it, he whispered. You did it, Aura said, adjusting the drip. I just made sure you didn't pass out. Julian looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the intelligence, the bravery, and the loyalty that couldn't be bought. Aura, Julian said, you saved my life. You saved my company. You saved my legacy. I owe you everything. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a checkbook. He wrote a number and slid it across the desk. Aura looked at it. It was a check for $5 million. She stared at the zeros. It was more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. It was freedom. It was safety. She picked up the check. She looked at Julian, and then she tore it in half. Julian's jaw dropped. What are you doing? I don't want your money, Mr. Thorne, Aura said softly. Then what do you want? Julian asked, bewildered. Name it. I want to finish nursing school, Aura said. I want my tuition paid, and I want a job. A job? Julian laughed, a rasping, genuine sound. You want to be a nurse here? We have a company clinic. No, Aura smiled. I want to be your nurse until you're fully recovered. And after that, maybe I can help you spot the snakes before they bite you. Julian looked at her. He saw the determination in her eyes, the same determination that had made her throw a note across a barricade and scream about poison in front of the entire world. Aura, Julian said, I think that is the best deal I have ever made. Aura Vance didn't just walk away with a paycheck. She walked away with a purpose. Julian Thorne made a full recovery, and with Aura by his side as his personal medical consultant and trusted advisor, he cleaned house. Isabel and Marcus were sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder and corporate fraud. Aura finished her nursing degree with top honors, funded entirely by the Thorne Foundation. And rumor has it the invisible Waitress and the Billionaire CEO are now inseparable, not just as employer and employee, but as partners. In the hushed elegance of the obsidian room, where fortunes are built and broken over crystal glasses, Aura Vance proved that the most powerful instinct isn't ambition or wealth. It's the quiet, stubborn courage to listen when the world tells you to stay silent. A shy waitress with nothing but a half-finished nursing degree and a heart still scarred by loss. She could have ignored the faint metallic scent on Julian Thorne's skin, the pale nail beds, the tremor in his hand. She could have poured the wine, collected her tip, and disappeared back into invisibility. Instead, she spoke, knowing it would cost her job, her dignity, perhaps even her freedom, because she recognized the smell of death before anyone else saw the danger. That single, trembling act of speaking up turned a slow, invisible murder into a race against time, exposed betrayal at the highest levels, and gave a powerful man back his life. Aura teaches us something achingly beautiful and terrifying. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in being seen or celebrated, but in refusing to look away when someone is suffering, even when no one will thank you, even when the consequences are devastating. In a world that rewards silence and punishes the overstepping voice, her story reminds us that true heroism often wears an apron, smells like dish soap, and costs everything, yet saves everything. We all carry moments where we sense something is wrong. A friend's quiet pain, a colleague's hidden struggle, a stranger's fading light. The question isn't whether we notice. It's whether we dare to say it out loud when everything tells us to stay quiet. Aura did. And because she did, a life was saved, a legacy was preserved, and a broken system was forced to see the truth. May we all find the courage to be that voice, even when our hands shake. What moment in your life made you realize the power of speaking up when it was hardest? Have you ever risked something to help someone you barely knew? And what happened after? Share your stories in the comments below. Your words could be the spark someone else needs today. If Ara's quiet bravery touched your heart and reminded you that ordinary people can change everything, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share stories like this every week to keep hope alive. Let's build a community where no one suffers in silence.